Hello, welcome to our DFS slate breakdown for Week 18 of the NFL season. As most of you remember from Week 17s of years past, Week 18 is definitely one with a lot of chaos. A lot of teams have already been eliminated, a few teams have locked up playoff seeds and don't have a lot to play for, so we're going to see some starters being benched, some starters playing half games. There's a lot of questions to be answered. Hopefully we can do that for you with the slate breakdown. First, we just want to cover teams on the main slate who have definite things to play for. So those are the games we're probably going to be attacking because we know starters will be in for the majority of those games. Indianapolis needs to win to get into the playoffs, so we know that they're going to play their starters most of the game. New Orleans needs to win and needs some help to get into the playoffs. The 49ers and Rams game is two teams that need to win. The 49ers need to win to secure a playoff spot. The Rams need to win to make sure that they maintain home field in the first round of the playoffs. The Arizona Cardinals have something to play for. If they win and the Rams lose, the Cardinals can have home field in the playoffs. So we think the Cardinals are definitely going to be playing some of their starters. And then we've got the Bills and the Patriots, both teams need to win to have a shot at the AFC East title. If the Bills win, they own the AFC East title and have a home game in the first round. If the Bills lose and the Patriots win, the Patriots will have a home game in the first round and will win the AFC East. So both teams will likely be playing to win, but also checking the scoreboard. And at halftime, we could see things change if those games are in doubt. So those are the situations where we know we really want to target. And then there are some other situations with other teams who may have some records to chase or player incentives or things like that. We will break that all down in the slate. Lastly, pause this video at any time, hit us up in the comments, ask us any questions you have about players who you should be playing. As a reminder, this is being recorded on Friday afternoon, so a lot could change between Friday and Sunday, so make sure you're checking the news or going to RotoBaller.com to check out our up-to-the-minute rankings. So let's dive into the slate. So we'll start at the quarterback position. Josh Allen is a name that stands out a lot just because we know what he can do with his legs. Obviously, he's the highest priced quarterback because people are expecting a big game from him. Something to keep in mind, two things actually. First, weather in Buffalo is expected to be awful. Snowy, windy. We've seen that can impact the passing game a little bit, even though Josh Allen can get it done with the legs. Another thing to consider is that the Bills only need to beat the Jets to win the AFC East. They already have a playoff spot locked up. So if this game is in control or if the Bills are doing a good enough job with DEVIN Singletary and guys like that on the ground, we could expect them to not use Josh Allen as much rushing. That way they want to try to avoid an injury. They obviously need him to be healthy for the playoffs if they have any chance of winning. So this could be a situation where we see a full half of Josh Allen playing 100% and then maybe a second half if the Bills have the lead of, running game, DEVIN Singletary, short passes, things that don't open up Josh Allen to a lot of potential injury. Tom Brady's going to play, but the Bucs have not a lot to play for. There's a little bit of seeding. I don't know how much we can trust it. We talked about Kyler Murray being somebody that we should be playing because Arizona has something to play for. So Murray is obviously an option. If you look at his DK game logs, he's been okay of late, not great. But if you look at the passing attempts, 38, 43, 41, 49. He is passing the ball a lot. The passing game has suffered a little bit without DeAndre Hopkins, but we know we're going to get volume from him. Burrow's going to be out. Jackson, I can't trust on that ankle. Good old Matthew Stafford. Stafford's had some great matchups the last couple weeks, and we've seen that he's really kind of failed to deliver. Everybody was passing all over Baltimore. Stafford winds up with around 21. That's not really what you're looking to see. San Francisco has been super pass funnel of late. Teams are really passing well against them. We saw A.J. Brown destroy them a couple weeks ago, but they're really, really good on the ground. They've been great against running backs since their bye. Over the last 4 weeks, so the number 2 defense in points allowed to running backs. So it makes sense for Los Angeles to pass the ball in this game. We're just not entirely sure how Stafford is going to do with that. It might be a couple interceptions, things like that, but he's certainly in play. Taysom Hill here at 62 is going to be tremendous value. We talked about New Orleans needing to win. We already talked about his floor thanks to the rushing attempts. right? 11, 12, 12. 11, 11, 11, 12. That always gives him a safe floor at a good 6,200. Kirk Cousins is going to play and start, so he is certainly a possibility. And then Trey Lance is another one that we really need to consider. Lance at 5,500. Jimmy Garoppolo is still having trouble throwing the ball, so we could get Trey Lance in a game that they really need to win. He only had 8 carries in the last game, but that game was pretty much well in hand early on against Houston, so they maybe didn't need to run him as much as they would have normally. At 5,500 with a safe floor because of his legs, Trey Lance is somebody that we should definitely consider. And then if you really want to pay down, we have Andy Dalton starting against Minnesota because Justin Fields is on the COVID list and will be out. I don't really know that I can go there, but if you're looking for just a safe floor option in a cash game, he could get you 15 to 20 points in a game against the Minnesota secondary that you can absolutely pass against. Now I'll move to the running back position. In a cash game, if you can fit Jonathan Taylor in, you should try to fit Jonathan Taylor in. He needs 266 rushing yards to get to 2,000. They're definitely going to try to get him there. I know it's a tall order, but the Colts do run a lot when they have the game in hand, upwards of 75% of the time in some games, and they should have the game in hand against Jacksonville in a game, as we mentioned, that the Colts need to win in order to make the playoffs. So if we're looking at getting, low 30s, high 20s carries from Jonathan Taylor, I think we could expect a really good outing from him. Alvin Kamara against the Falcons for $1,000 cheaper is obviously also still in play. And then you kind of have to scroll down. I mean, Dalvin Cook, Najee Harris, these guys are fine. I don't love the spots. I much prefer the spot right here for David Montgomery, who, much like he did last year, has been playing really solid football at the end of the season in some good matchups, helped teams win some fantasy championships, and is going to help us, I think, in DraftKings as well. There's a really safe volume floor here, especially with Andy Dalton at quarterback now. So I really like Montgomery. Rashad Penny has been playing great football. There's a little bit of a question mark there with the Cardinals' rush defense. It's been solid. So Penny isn't somebody we want to be off, but, I'm not expecting an outing like he had the last couple of games against Chicago and Detroit, especially Detroit, which has been a pretty putrid run defense for much of the year. Some other ones I like. Listen, Green Bay, they don't have anything to play for. They have the number 1 seed locked up. I think you're going to get the starters for maybe half of the game, and then you might get some of the backups. So is A.J. Dillon going to play the full game when they go to the backups? Are they going to not use Aaron Jones and just use A.J. Dillon? I don't know. That's a tough question. It's possible, but they might also choose to rest Dillon since he's been getting a lot of carries. So it's not somebody you want to play in cash, maybe in GPP if you're going to bank on that second half usage, but who really knows? Ronald Jones, I don't expect him to play because of an injury. Listen, Devin Singletary is the number 1 running back on the Buffalo Bills. He's getting a bunch of usage. He's getting over 75% of the snaps, most of the carries the last few games. If we talked about this, if they're up against the Jets and they're trying to save Josh Allen from taking unnecessary contact, we could see a lot of Devin Singletary, especially if it's a snowy, ugly game. So that's definitely something we want to keep in mind. I'm not touching DeAndre Swift. Dan Campbell burned me on that last week. I don't think they're going to cut him loose. I can't go there. Ramondre Stevenson is interesting because Damian Harris has that hamstring injury. So since New England is already in the playoffs, keep an eye on that Damian Harris news. If he doesn't play, I think Ramondre Stevenson is going to be a huge option for you. And he might even be an option if Harris does play in GPPs because maybe they'll turn to Stevenson more in the second half of that game. JARET Patterson is somebody to keep an eye on because Washington doesn't have anything to play for. Antonio Gibson is off the COVID list, but he's been dealing with a fractured shin for much of the year, so are they really going to play him in a meaningless game? Patterson looked pretty good against the Giants last game, so maybe this is a game where they just let JARET Patterson go again. And that would be value. Sorry, Patterson looked good last week against the Eagles. This week he has the Giants. And that would be a pretty good matchup for him. We saw what David Montgomery did. And then Keyshawn Vaughn and Samaje Perine are guys both right here to keep an eye on at 5,300. If Ronald Jones doesn't play, we could see Keyshawn Vaughn get the start. Leonard Fournette is coming off the IR for the playoffs, so they don't really have to rest Vaughn. So he could get the start against Carolina. And then Samaje Perine is going to start because Joe Mixon is out for this game against Cleveland. Cleveland has nothing to play for, so we could get a big Samaje Perine game, similar to like week 5 and 7, where he was getting or splitting carries there with Mixon, except now he's going to get even more work. So he's somebody that we could definitely keep in mind there. And then one more who I forgot. I can't believe I skipped over him. Right here, D'Onta Foreman at 5,700 is a great play against Houston. If you're a believer in that, we have a little bit of a revenge narrative going on in there. But also, he's gotten so many carries. I don't expect Derrick Henry to play in this game, but Derrick Henry is likely to come back. Tennessee is another team I should have mentioned earlier as a team with something to play for. If they win, they lock up the number 1 seed in the AFC. That's super important for them because it gives them an extra week to get Derrick Henry fully healthy before the playoffs start in earnest for them. So because they have Henry coming back, I don't think they need to be cautious with D'Onta Foreman. I think he still could be looking at around 24, 25, 26 carries against a beatable Texans run defense, and I think you could be looking at a really solid option for him, and I'm not really sure why they didn't price him up a little bit higher. So now we'll move to wide receiver. Obviously, just like Jonathan Taylor on the running back side, if you're playing cash and you can fit Cooper Kupp in, you should fit Cooper Kupp in. I mean, if you just scroll through the game log, right, there's been only 3 weeks all season where he hasn't hit 20 points. He is an extremely consistent cash game option. We talked about, what A.J. Brown did to the 49ers pass defense a couple weeks ago. Brandon Cooks had a good game last week. So I think we could see a really strong game from Cooper Kupp. And if you're going to build in a stack, he's also definitely stackable with him and Stafford. I think you could build a stack with Stafford and Kupp and then run it back with Odell Beckham. If you're going to go with that Ram stack, another potential option right here is Ben Skowronek, who started to split snaps a little bit with Van Jefferson last week. Not a lot came of it, but if you're going to stack, I think this is an interesting way to go with that kind of punt. You could run it back if you wanted with Elijah Mitchell, who has gotten a significant amount of work. He's still practicing in a limited capacity, but I mean, when he plays, he is that number 1 option for them in the backfield. He gets almost all of the work. I think you could also run it back with somebody like Brandon Ayuk. I know that people may want to go to Debo. Debo's price here at wide receiver at 5,800 is a lot for me. Ayuk is somebody who seeing 5-6 targets a game, but he is getting some red zone looks. I just think there's kind of like a safe floor there, but he is an explosive playmaker and is obviously much cheaper than Debo if you wanted to run it back there. Other options at wide receiver, Jamar Chase probably not going to play. I'm not really going there. The Vikings did say they're going to start their starters, so Justin Jefferson certainly in play. And if you wanted to go kind of like a Jefferson or David Montgomery mini stack or things like that, I think that could be interesting for you. Diggs is somebody, the matchup looks good. I don't really know that I'm going to go there because, as we talked about it, it's a snowy game. And I think the Bills are going to try to win without really having to use Diggs, which makes me far more interested in Gabriel Davis at only 4,900. If the Bills try and win this game and don't try to open up Stephon Diggs to too much punishment, or the Bills get a halftime lead and don't play a lot of their starters or use their starters too much in the second half, I think we could see a lot more Gabriel Davis than we've been seeing. He's already emerged as the number 2 wide receiver in Buffalo, but could see even more work there. So I really like him at that 4,900 price tag. Elsewhere at wide receiver, A.J. Brown, definitely going to play, but I think, if Tennessee gets up early, it's more of a run game. Your guess is as good as mine with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. Again, I think that this could be a sneaky game because I think that Arizona needs this game, right? We talked about that. They need this game, and if you did something kind of like, Kyler Murray, and then, we'll talk about it later, but you go to Zach Ertz, you could run it back with the DK Metcalf. If you really wanted to push it, and full onslaught, you can go to ANTOINE WESLEY in this stack, who we talked about last week, really liking, and then he had 2 touchdowns, 6'5", big red zone target, on the field a lot for Arizona, so he's somebody who could be useful as a punt play option there. Elsewhere here, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I love it. He's been great. I think the Packers are going to play their starters for the first half of the game, and then I think you're going to see the starters come out if they have this game in hand, because, again, the Packers have a number 1 seed locked up. Jair Alexander is on the COVID list. Who knows if he's going to be activated in time. If he doesn't, the secondary is a little more beatable, but again, Amon-Ra St. Brown has really delivered, and if he's going to face backups in the second half, I think he could be a sneaky option, because people are going to see, the 9th here in red for Green Bay and not play him. Brandon Cooks against Tennessee, somebody that I really like going there as well, because I think the matchup is good. I think that Tennessee is going to control the game. I don't see any reason why Houston, they seem to be wanting to play and get, Davis Mills, their rookie quarterback, a little bit more reps. So I don't see any reason why they would pull out their starters. I can't go Pittman just because I think they're just going to run in that game. KJ Osborne is really interesting. He's on the field a lot without Adam Thielen. He gets over 90% of snaps, a lot more targets. Again, we talked about Minnesota's going to play their starters. Osborne is a starter. He's going to see action against a very beatable Chicago secondary. If you keep going down, a couple options that I like. We already talked about Gabriel Davis. Braxton Berrios has been great, but he missed practice on Wednesday and Thursday because of a quad, and Jamison Crowder is back. So I think we might be off the Braxton Berrios train for this point in the season. Allen Lazard and Marquez Valdes-Scantling are really interesting because, as we talked about, I think Green Bay plays their starters for the first half of this game, and that's Lazard. But then also, if they rest Devontae Adams, you could still see more Lazard because they need to have somebody on the field to throw to. So guys like Lazard and Marquez Valdes-Scantling could get more run in the second half when the starters are out. And if that's with Jordan Love, who really knows how good those snaps and routes are going to be. But it's interesting against a beatable Detroit secondary. So I think Lazard and Valdes-Scantlings are guys to keep in mind. Laquan Treadwell, weirdly, has had a pretty safe target floor against an Indianapolis secondary that can be beat. So he's an option if you want to keep in mind. If you want to do a mini stack with like Jonathan Taylor and then Laquan Treadwell, I think Treadwell is my favorite option in the Jacksonville passing game, which isn't really saying a lot, but I think he is. And then we talked about Wesley already. And then if you scroll down, Ray McCloud is somebody we need to keep in mind, especially on DraftKings, which is a full PPR format. Deontay Johnson is on the COVID IR. He's not going to play. Ray McCloud has been getting the second most routes and targets over the last few weeks, slightly ahead of Claypool. And so without Johnson, listen, somebody's going to have to catch 15 passes for 30 yards from Ben Roethlisberger. And I think it's going to be Ray McCloud. We talked about how Baltimore has a beatable secondary, but the Steelers don't really push the ball down the field, so I don't think you're going to get a lot of deep passes from them. But McCloud could be active underneath. You could be looking at like kind of a 15-point floor if he's catching 10 balls, or 12 balls or 13. So I think that's somebody that we definitely need to keep in mind. And then one guy who I passed, who I think we also need to keep in mind, is CYRIL Grayson. Grayson has been operating as the wide receiver number 2 for Tampa, and with Mike Evans nursing a hamstring injury, Antonio Brown now off the team, Chris Godwin out for the season, I think we could see a lot of CYRIL Grayson, especially if they play Mike Evans for a little bit but don't push him too much because they know they've clinched a playoff spot. So we could see Evans play less than normal, which could mean more Grayson. I know we've tried to make Tyler Johnson happen in the past. It doesn't seem to be. It seems to be CYRIL Grayson. And then maybe if you're looking to throw a dart, Brashad Perryman. But I'd much rather go with CYRIL Grayson. And now we'll move to the tight end position. Mark Andrews up at the top. You can definitely pay up for that if you want. I mean, Pittsburgh is a tough matchup, but we know that Andrews is essentially the wide receiver number one. I think we're going to get Tyler Huntley again, which I don't really love. I know that he was good against Green Bay, but I think that was kind of a career game. So I don't think you're really going to see this kind of 30-point upside from Andrews against Pittsburgh. So it's tough at 7,500, but again, is possible. Kyle Pitts has records to chase. So keep an eye on his practice participation today on Friday. He practiced in a limited way on Thursday after suffering a hamstring injury against the Bills. But I think that Atlanta's going to want to get him some rookie records. So if he plays, that's definitely something that we need to keep in mind. Zach Ertz has been on the field like crazy, running tons of routes, seeing tons of snaps since DeAndre Hopkins went out. This is a pretty safe floor. We already talked about how kind of Antoine Wesley has emerged in the red zone, which has taken some red zone looks away from Ertz, which is why he hasn't hit any kind of massive ceiling. So at 53, he's safe, but it's, who really knows what that upside is going to be. But again, we have few teams that are really playing for something, and the Cardinals are one of them. With Deontay Johnson out, Pat Freiermuth becomes interesting because he's seen a high target volume and he could see even more targets again against the vulnerable Ravens pass defense with Deontay Johnson out. So something to keep in mind at 4,600. And then Gerald Everett at 3,700 is interesting. He's seeing consistent targets from Russell Wilson. Seattle has, been they've not been giving up, right? They're playing to win these games. We know that Arizona needs to win this game. It's a little bit of a division rivalry, so I think we could expect Everett to play most of the game. And I like his involvement in that offense. Hunter Henry, always a possibility. We know that he gets consistent target share here, but you can see from that point total, it's just who knows if New England actually really needs to throw. Or it needs to throw in the red zone. So he's a little bit riskier than other options, but is a possibility there. If you want to do the Evan Engram dance, you can. Kadarius Toney is out, so it's just Engram. Again, that hasn't really led to any production. I don't really know that I can go there. Hayden Hurst is somebody to keep an eye on if Kyle Pitts doesn't go, but I do think Kyle Pitts is going to go. So he's somebody that we can... Hurts is somebody we might not really be using. Bates has kind of emerged in this pass-catching role for Washington, taking some snaps away from Ricky Seals-Jones. They have a pretty good matchup against the Giants. He's only 3,000, so I think there's a little bit of safety in that. But again, Washington doesn't have anything to play for, but it's not like Bates is a high-profile guy for them that they need to watch injury. And then, a little bit of a sneaky GPP play, Josiah DeGuara. If we only see the starters for one half, you could see DeGuara become a little bit more involved kind of in the second half when the bench players are out there. At 2,900, that's just kind of if you're really punting down at the position. And then last, there is Austin Hooper. Njoku and Harrison Bryant haven't been practicing, so it's a possibility that in a meaningless game, we get Hooper as the only tight end in Cleveland. We know that Hooper has performed pretty well when he's the only option there. There's some risk there because we don't really know how much Cleveland is going to try in this game. We know it's not going to be Baker Mayfield, but Case Keenum is not that big of a downgrade. At 3,600, there's, he's only $100 cheaper than Gerald Everett. I prefer the security of Everett, but I think that Hooper is somebody that you could have in your player pool if you want. And then we'll move to defense. I think Miami's getting too big of a price cut here at 2,400. That was a 17-3 game against Tennessee. In the middle of the fourth quarter, Miami's offense turned the ball over a couple times going forward on fourth down and gave Tennessee some short field. This is still a team that brings a significant amount of pressure, and Mac Jones, rookie quarterback, could be forced into some mistakes. So at 2,400, I think that they're a good salary saving option. And then we need to look at teams that we know have something to play for. The Steelers at 3,000 are still potentially in the playoff hunt. Baltimore gives up the most sacks in the NFL. The Steelers have a ton of sacks, so this is something that's certainly in play. The Giants just kind of gave up against Chicago last week, so it's entirely possible they do the same again against Washington. At 3,100, that's of interest. New Orleans, They're my number one defense for this week because they've been playing incredibly well of late. They need to win, and Atlanta is a team that's giving up the 5th most points to fantasy defenses. So at 3,400, I think they're a really great play. I don't really see the need to go to these higher teams just because of how good a play New Orleans is at 3,400. And then there are some defenses that could emerge if you look into some injury situations. So we don't really necessarily know who Cincinnati is going to play, but Cleveland has a solid defense if they're going to play their defensive starters, and we're not getting, Joe Mixon or Joe Burrow or Jamar Chase, then Cleveland at 2,600 becomes interesting. And then Carolina at 2,500, we know that we're probably not going to get Ronald Jones. There's no Chris Godwin. There's no Antonio Brown. If we get any indication that, Mike Evans might be limited or they might only play Brady half, things like that to keep in mind. Carolina at 25 becomes a little interesting as well. So make sure to hit us up in the comments and ask us any questions you have about who you should play on this slate. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Even though the NFL regular season is over after this week, we're going to be putting out playoff content, and you can get our 2022 NFL content before anybody else does. Also, we're bringing you baseball content in just a couple of months, so if you subscribe, you can get those videos as well. And good luck in Week 18.